Everything is great. Well, first, welcome back as always. What's the deal?
What is the deal? It's Trump. I mean, we heard we're now almost at year 2 of the Trump administration, and we heard the first year when things really started rocketing up. Oh, it's Obama. It's just the leftovers.
It's the Obama economy. Yeah, it's all Obama did everything because you didn't build this.
Well, here we are. How can you argue that it's not Trump? All right, what's happened
with a straight face.
Let's just be honest. But the question is, what has he done? And let's be very specific. There's stuff on the margins that mattered, but the real big thing that he did was, first of all, to reinvigorate business confidence. And that was soft, but there were some things. He went after the healthcare. He basically signaled to business, I'm on your side and I'm going to do some things for you. That created a desire to start a little bit of investing. But the real thing was at the beginning of the year, or I should say, it was more like September of last year when they confirmed there would be a tax cut. Okay, that happened to kick in January, but in reality, the message was received in the fourth quarter of last year. So we've had almost a full year of people realizing there's more money coming into their pockets, and the same thing with businesses. And businesses, a lot of them responded. I think Home Depot was one that said, here, $1,000 extra bonus to everybody. Let's share the largesse. Because until now, business profits have gone into share buybacks. They haven't gone into wage hikes. I think that you're going to start seeing that change, and that's a positive. So here again, we've got more money in the pockets of businesses, more money in the pockets of consumers, of employees, and 4.2% GDP in the second quarter. That comes from this sugar rush. So you raise your hand, and the glass is half empty crowd will say, yeah, anybody can buy a lot of this if you give people more money. And I would say precisely that was the whole point. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of those glasses half full, half empty people will say, and it's going to go away. I think you're going to see tax receipts go up because again, the typical response to giving back money to people in the form of tax cuts is, but then the U.S. government has to foot the bill by having lower tax revenues. I think you're going to find that the opposite is happening, that in fact, more spending, more tax receipts, and so on and so forth. So where do we go from here? We've got the elections coming up. I think the midterm election is going to be actually disappointing for the Dems. I think we've heard talk about a blue wave, where they're just going to dominate. I think they'll come to take back the House, but it's going to be razor thin, and that majority is going to be slender enough where a Trump can come in and drive a wedge between the leadership and the rank and file. Let's face it, it's the economy, stupid, and Trump owns the economy. Every gesture he's made, we now have, for example, black unemployment, the lowest ever. He can dominate the agenda if the agenda topic is economics. The Democrats bring nothing to the party. And in fact, they're going to have to start following what he's putting on the table. It's going to be hard to fight the Trump agenda going forward.
Yeah,
so what does that mean?
Let me just interject. So I think that Trump is the Steve Jobs of politics. All right. We've never seen a force like this in politics before. And they said that Steve Jobs had the ability to, like, when people were around him, to distort reality, to make people believe they could do things that they couldn't do, and then actually wound up doing. Trump is this force in politics that distorts the whole political paradigm and makes people believe that he can do things that, I'm the biggest skeptic. I've written about it before. I didn't think he could do. And yet, you can never underestimate the power of psychology and the power of one super focused, super strong personality to alter everything that we think we know.
Well, let's talk about for a second, take the 30,000-foot view and talk about what's going on in terms of the actions that affect us. We do have a master showman, but at the same time, he's coming into a situation where there's just nothing but low-hanging fruit. When when Obama got elected, he got elected in a mess. You had a recession. You've got 2 wars going on. A lot of the cards were dealt. He didn't then proceed to do a lot of things. He had to do some trade-offs. Gee, China and Russia, we need you on our side, so we'll let you get away with some bad behavior. Iran, we don't want you causing trouble, so we'll let you get away with some bad behavior. Once we got past those issues, you still had a guy who basically had no real experience. I mean, let's face it, he was a junior senator. The guy was barely out of law school when he became president. Let's really call it what it is. Conversely,
had no accomplishments whatsoever. None.
I love the fact that the guy got a Nobel Prize without doing anything. I'd love to get one of those, right? I'm a nice guy. I bring peace and love. Here's my point, though. With Trump, you've got a guy coming in who has a set of conditions that anybody coming in could do better with. And by that, I mean you have trade agreements where clearly they're not in favor of the U.S. at this time. And what did Trump say along the campaign trail? We've got these ancient agreements. We have a 70-year-old NATO agreement. Why aren't we revisiting it and making sure that it's up to modern situations? Same thing with NAFTA. It's 20, 30 years old. Why aren't we checking in to see if it works for us? You had a guy who had experience in the real world doing business deals, not building a bureaucratic empire. That bureaucratic empires, being what they are self-perpetuating. He came in and said, wait a second. And look at what he's done, for example, with some of the foreign money that's been spread around. Hey, you know what? We've given $10 billion over 20 years to this group over here. They vote against us. They work against us. Maybe that's not money well spent. In other words, you have a president coming in who's very much a business mind. What do I get for what I spend? I am paying the piper. I get to call the tune. And the rest of the world is freaking out. But what that translates into is he's able to now look around without getting sucked into these outdated holy cows. And he's able to say, wait a second, we have a trade agreement and it's not really been benefiting us. We've enabled GM to go right across our borders, build their cars there and re-import them and not use American workers. How is that okay? How does that help us?
Why is that good?
Now I can understand it at a certain level. The idea behind NAFTA, for example, was like a Marshall Plan. Let's go in there, invest in another economy, and over time they will buy more of our products. So hey, it's like a classic in private equity. They call it the J curve, where in the beginning, if you can imagine a capital J, it goes down, right? Your profits go down a little, and then all of a sudden they rocket up even higher. And that's what an investment is supposed to do. Mm-hmm. We invest early on. We don't expect profits initially, but eventually we expect them to be even better than if we hadn't done a thing.
Exactly.
I think that's the idea behind NAFTA. Hey, let's raise the spending capability of Mexico, and they will start to buy more American goods, and we all win, right? Let's grow the pie, not worry about taking a different slice of the pie. I think Trump came into a situation where basically we had administration after administration being run by lifetime bureaucrats, from Clinton all the way through Obama. Bureaucrat. You now have a businessman coming in saying things aren't being well run, and there's all this low-hanging fruit. Hey, why don't I push back on China? Why? What's to lose? And so here we are today. What we're seeing is we've got the economy doing better domestically. Then he's manufacturing fights with tariff wars. That's awesome. Why? Because he can't lose. Politically, he can't lose, right? You pick a fight and, America, tough actor on the stage. But in reality, there's a real objective here. He's going to bring back billions of dollars. And, you could argue, well, we're a $14 trillion economy. What's a few billion? Well, let me tell you something. It's not a few billion. It's probably going to be somewhere between 50 to 100 billion a year when all is said and done. And that's not small. That's a lot of jobs.
Not small potatoes.
It's manufacturing, though. It's not nothing. It's better than the other guys have done. And it creates that trajectory that we want to see. It basically is telling Apple at some point in time, you need to stop making stuff outside of the U.S. and then trying to sell it back to us. You need to make it here. And you can dictate that. And you need to dictate that. And if you don't, we won't make it hurt. And I think this is just common sense. Again, people will say free trade, and I'm all for free trade. But since it doesn't exist and it never has existed, rather than sit there and pray for some kind of paradise, let's deal with the world the way it is. We have predatory trading partners. We need to basically acknowledge that and stop trying to be a light unto the nations kind of stuff. Holier than thou. Guess what? Our doors are open. We don't care what we do, steal our IP, mess with us militarily. It's all okay because someday you'll follow our ways. Come on.
It hasn't worked. We
don't have a sucker. We don't have a sucker in power. What we got is a guy who's used to dealing with them. I'm in the construction business in New York. You think he hasn't dealt with tough guys? He's been divorced 3 times. You think he hasn't dealt with some tough situations?
Hey, I know the guy personally. I did some work for him, minor cases once upon a time. And look, it was the guy can be charming like you can't believe if he wants you to like him. And he could be a real SOB like you can't believe if he doesn't want you to like him. And that's what this is about. So we're living in this Trumptopia, if you will. I call it Trumphoria, and I've actually got the URL, Trumphoria.com. I bought that. But point is, how long can the party really go on here, Andrew? I mean,
when you've got the conditions that we had, which is you could turn around and have tons of opportunities to improve the economy. He came in and he has, I think you and I talked about this before. He has a skill. It's not just the situation he's coming into. I mentioned Obama came into a situation where a lot of the cards were dealt. It's not just that he's coming into a situation where there's opportunities. It's the way he himself has lived his life of showmanship. This guy understands. Remember, he was doing, what was it, the UFL, where he was trying to launch the next generation NFL. He's done boxing. He's done which version of beauty contest that he's led. He understands how to event plan, how to generate excitement, how to get attention, and how to roll things out. When he came in, there was a famous picture that was taken of a board with Steve Bannon and I think a guy named Shmuley. But basically, it was, these are the things we're going to be doing. These are the platforms, and this is our agenda. And I think when Trump came in almost 2 years ago, it wasn't just this is the laundry list of things that we want to do. This is the stages. We're going to phase approach. We're going to not do it all at once. We're going to start chipping away and making one thing build on top of the other. An example would be the way he's doing his trade negotiations. He started with Mexico and Canada, then announced, hey, China and Europe, we don't like you either. Well, why would he do that? Well, the weak links are Mexico and Canada. The tougher one's going to be China because of the dollars at stake. Mexico, we dominate. They will have to follow whatever we want them to follow, no matter what kind of national pride is at stake. We call the shots. And so you have this rolling thunder where he's going to build and build. I don't know if you saw the same thing I did, but when Mexico folded last week and said, okay, you got it, whatever deal you want, Canada was very quick to say, hold on, we need to wrap ours up too. And immediately Europe also said, okay, you got it. How about 0% tariffs on cars? I mean, immediately all the other rats started leaving the ship, except for China. China has too much at stake. The issues are also more complex. It's not just economic. There's a lot of military and geopolitical stuff that's wrapped up in there.
Yes.
But he's going in that direction. I mean, after a while, if you've got everybody else, let me not go into politics too much, but again, we're talking about someone who understands where he can go. There's a lot. I think anybody coming in could have done a better job than a lot of the bozos before us from an economic industrial policy standpoint. I think you've got someone who understands that, someone who's experienced at negotiations, someone who I think has been sold off and discounted far too often. Remember, this is someone who had to deal with New York politics for a while. So when you say he doesn't understand politics, he understands politics and bureaucracy very well.
Let's not forget who attended his wedding to Melania.
Which one?
To Melania, Hillary and Bill. That's not the kind of guy who doesn't understand power and politics.
He may not be the suavest guy, but he knows how to get stuff going. He understands, in other words, the leverage that you need to be a successful politician. And he understands at this juncture that we have some tough things that we need to deal with. And he's going to try to be that tough guy, not that go along, get along guy.
No.
But, you've got somebody in charge who I think has a game plan, has been very successful with his game plan. And that game plan is to stagger the attacks on the establishment and on the status quo. So I thought at the beginning of the year, sometime around the election time, we would see him rolling out an infrastructure bill because, again, an infrastructure bill is an amazing thing if he can get it going from an economic boost standpoint. And it's also something that you would want to roll out to get the votes. I don't think he necessarily needs to waste that bullet at this time. I think he's got a lot of ammo. The Mueller thing, for example, he doesn't have to really fight anymore. People are bored.
It's
2 years in, there's really nothing. I mean, they got Manafort on something he did 6 years ago before he was with Trump. They got all these little two-bit players on stuff they did before the campaign. It's like, come on. Yeah, enough. I think the public recognizes this.
And Mueller just announced that he reconsidered and he's going to allow Trump to give him written answers to his questions. So no deposition there, no oath. Well, maybe it'll be under oath, doesn't matter. But the fact that he's basically saying, all right, you can have your lawyers write the answers. You can cheat during the test. And so that to me is the final capitulation. Nothing's happening. So, Andrew, when we have this conversation 6 months from now, after the midterm, where will we be?
Okay, so what we've got is we've laid the groundwork for saying there were a lot of low-hanging fruit to go after to boost the economy, and Trump's been doing that. He has ammunition that he can still throw on the table. Let's use the infrastructure bill as one example of where he can come out. And again, the tax credit stuff works until we get to say, next year, April, May. It's been a year. People say, okay, now what? What else do you have for me? So we've got still about 6 months of gas in the tank as far as that's concerned. But I think there's more onshoring going on. I'm seeing a lot more happening in the U.S. I don't think it's just the tax cut. I think the tariffs are also now building on that. People worried, prices are going to go up. Well, guess what? The tariffs hit after Christmas shopping is done. Notice again, the showmanship, the timing. They kick in November. Well, guess what? Everything that needed to come into the U.S. shores and get on the shelves in order for the American shoppers to buy, that's already happened by that point. So the impact of that on the consumer is less and less noticeable. Okay? Again, timing matters. What happens in the midterm elections, I mean, let's just assume that he loses the House. Okay, a narrow vote. But I think it's going to be narrow enough where he can kind of force divisions in the House such that he's able to bring out the votes that he needs when he needs. At this juncture, anything that was expected in terms of hamstringing him politically with the Mueller thing is gone. You have a president who owns the Senate, can more or less dominate the House. And by the way, if he doesn't get his way, the Democrats again will suffer because he can blame them, right? You can always throw the other party under the bus. Absolutely. Hey, I tried to do this, but the House of Representatives and that damn Pelosi, right? Mm-hmm. The guy's in a no-lose position. Now, what is his agenda going forward? His agenda is let's boost the economy in all these different ways. Whatever he obtains this year from the Chinese, from the Europeans, won't materialize until next year. But again, remember, next year, the gas that we just got, that sugar high from the tax cut starts to go away, year over year. What do you have next? Boom. Now, all of a sudden, we've got trade, that kicking in and boosting us. Then an infrastructure bill. This guy owns the next 2 to 3 years of the economic agenda. And I see no negatives because the U.S. has disconnected from the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. In essence, what we're talking about is in the short term, if the pie is only so big, you have a president saying, guess what? The U.S. is taking a bigger slice of the pie. Deal with it. Mm-hmm. And that's phenomenal. That's great for the U.S. It's horrible for Europe and China because they're already stumbling. And the data that I've been tracking, I don't know if you knew this. I do a lot of forecasting. And it's all based on the same data points, folks. It's all based on just the fundamentals of widgets. Who's buying what? How much are they buying? Are they buying more? Are they buying less? And I use semiconductors and I use shipping data because it doesn't lie. If you're going to buy more stuff, well, you're going to have more semiconductors being bought because semiconductors are the lifeblood of this modern economy. Same thing with shipping. You got to get it from point A to point B. So you can't fudge these numbers. And I am, this year, leading the pack of all these professional, the Goldmans, all those guys out there, in terms of pointing out what's going on in Germany and their economy. And Germany is Europe, right? They drive the entire economy. What happens to Germany is what's going to happen to Europe. And Germany has been stumbling all year. Now, we're in September, and my forecast is another horrible month. And this, again, will blow the expert forecasters out of the water, even though every month they've been wrong and I've been right. What's going on in Europe is, well, they spent the past 2 years shoving about $100 billion a year at integrating migrants. Now, what that really means is...
Good investment.
It's fiscal spending. It's public spending to boost the economy, because what they're doing is now you have a couple million people who suddenly land on your shores, and you're going to have to feed them, give them free medical care, house them, clothe them, give them free cell phones, on and on and on. $100 billion. But it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It sucked up all the available vacancies, hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, apartments. It's all gone. And so they've had this massive property boom, not because the economy's doing well, but they have no empty places to house 2 million people.
It's a population increase. It's a population increase related.
It's a population GDP increase. Well, guess what? They've been stumbling because that's done. That game, because basically the Europeans have said no more and no more spending. Well, wait, you mean we can't continue to somehow find $100 billion and shove it into the economy? Because that's what was going on. No. Oh, and guess what? The people who came in have no skills. So it wasn't this case of we're importing people who can go to work immediately. They're basically welfare recipients. Okay. So you actually now have that boost that came from the public pocketbook is now becoming a massive drain. And remember, Europe is not the dog. They're the tail that gets wagged. They depend on exports. And like we just saw in the past couple of days, auto sales are down. 20% of Germany's exports are auto-related. This is a problem for them. China's pushing back. Remember, China's the other one here. If Europe is the tail, China's the dog. China's also struggling. Their recent PMIs, the stuff that measures if their manufacturing is expanding or not, came in at barely expansionary. Just squeaked it. Enough to basically say it's noise.
Funny how that
China
works.
has come to a standstill. Europe is already going to be recessionary by next year. And here the U.S. is just booming and has more, there's more tools in the toolkit that Trump can throw out there. So I'm gung-ho on the U.S. And then you have this virtual cycle. Everyone else is going to be gung-ho. And we know that confidence is half the battle.
Sure.
You raise rates. You continue to have an economy that's doing well. You have rates going up. All this money is going to leave emerging markets and just come into the U.S. stock market. So, in the near term, there can be fits and starts. I am long and strong on the U.S. economy and on the market here.
All right. Well, that sounds reasonable under the circumstances. I think you're going to be closer to being right than anybody else out there for sure. And we're going to have this conversation 6 months from now and go back. I'm taking notes, and we're going to see whether you were right or not. But so far, so good. So people want to find out more about you. They go to Moneyball Economics. What are you going to find there?
You are going to find yourself a weekly free report based on fundamental analysis that says this is the way the world really is functioning today, and what do you want to do about it as an investor?